Hi, I'm J. Lenora Bressler, and welcome to the August 2nd, 2017 edition of the Bible Delight in the Details, as we continue our look at the Psalms. One of the most famous Psalms is Psalm 51, which is David's great confession psalm, in which he asks God to forgive him for his egregious sin with Bathsheba and the murder of her husband. Now, what's interesting to me in this is that Christ gave us the model prayer, also known as the Lord's Prayer, how we are to pray to God in general and unusual circumstances. But David is the one that actually gives us the model confession. And how appropriate, because Jesus, being the sinless man, the second perfect Adam, really never had anything to confess, never had anything to ask forgiveness for. And therefore, to be honest, is not the best person to teach us a confession, how to confess. But David, a man after God's own heart, who has been through being someone who knew God and yet still rebelled and still sinned, who felt the guilt, who felt the being away from God that sin brings us, he's in the best position to give us a example of what a good confession, so to speak, looks and sounds like. And we see it in Psalm 51, which we're going to look at over the next couple days. Let's start with the very first verse. Be gracious to me, God, according to your faithful love, according to your abundant compassion, blot out my rebellion. There's several interesting things to notice right off the bat. First of all is what God is called here. He is called God. Now, in the Hebrew, this is the most basic form of the title of God. It is not the covenant name of God, Yahweh. It is not what is often translated as Lord, which implies that he's your Lord, which implies a relationship. It is going back to the Elohim, or the word that is used originally in the Bible for the Creator God. This is before there is the personal revelation or any implication that there is a personal relationship. Now, why is that key? It's because we notice that David is not going to act like he has any claim on God. He is not going to take any kind of liberties with God. He's not going to take any presumption, like I presume on my relationship with you. Yet we do know that he was a man after God's own heart. He's had a whole lifetime, or at least to middle age, experience with God. He's been a great champion of God, and yet we see right offhand that he is not taking any liberties. And that's important. When you're in trouble, when you've done something wrong, you don't take liberties. You shouldn't go in there and say, well, you should forgive me because you owe me. That is not the way to deal with a human being, much less with God. Now, he is asking to be dealt with in a certain way, in a kind way. But why? Again, he's not saying because I'm your man, because I'm great, because I've done all these things, but rather he appeals to the nature of God. Be gracious to me according to your faithful love, according to your abundant compassion. In other words, not because I deserve it, but because it is your nature. Again, this shows such a contrite spirit and a correct understanding of God's nature and ours. We are not in any position to be presumptuous or to act like God owes us anything, even if we have, as in David's case, done things which you might say were for God. Also, he's very blunt, David is. He calls it what it is. He says, blot out my rebellion. Now, the term rebellion indicates that he's not making any excuses. He's not going to blame anybody. He is calling it what it is. It is outright, intentional, understood disobedience. And we will see later that he goes on to describe what he's done in very blatant terms. You know, when you are in trouble and you've done wrong and you're trying to apologize and you're trying to get forgiveness, whether it's with God or an individual, it is not the time to be blaming other people. Blaming does not vindicate you. Also, making excuses. Say, well, I wouldn't have done it except for this and that. That doesn't help either. You need to take responsibility. And David very clearly does. He calls it what it is. It is outright, intentional, understood, not done in ignorance, but willful rebellion. And, you know, we as Christians, we like to say that we're children of God. We like to say that we are citizens of heaven. We love to say we're ambassadors of the kingdom. But with those status, there is the possibility that we can be traitors. We can be treasonous. We can rebel. If you are a child, you can rebel. If you are an ambassador for a country and a citizen of a country, you can commit treason. And when we disobey God, we need to be very clear that we understand within ourselves and that we're willing to admit that that is exactly what it is. Because only then is God in a position to say, well, they understand the severity here. And therefore, because they understand the severity, it empowers me to be overly gracious. I can be gracious because I don't have to keep harping on them how bad it is. They understand that. So be absolutely sure that you come clean in your own mind and with God as to that it truly is rebellion, outright rebellion. And that is the beginning of the road to forgiveness and reconciliation. And we will see that on the next edition of the Bible, Delight in the Details. Have a great day.